are going to be talking, and I think I need to start. Hold on. Here's going to be our agenda. We're going to do some introductions. We're going to share who we are and what your interests are in this session. And, really this session is about the idea that e-portfolios can be used for a lot of things. And really, what can't they be used for if, we're using them for a dissertation, and probably a very unique idea for some of you in this group. And we want to provide you with some background of our process. We also want to share with you examples. So Melissa Peary is going to share her experience completely finishing her dissertation with this process. Congratulations, Dr. Peary. And Mandy Mitsudo and Sheila Mullooly are also going to share their experience in getting to the milestone of being all but dissertation, or ABD. And then we are going to share the lessons that we've learned in starting this process. And then we'll have quite a bit of time, I think, for discussions and questions. So who we are, I'm Candace Reynolds, and I am a faculty member in the Educational Leadership and Policy Department, and I have the pleasure of being the doctoral advisor for the three great scholars that are going to be presenting here today. Mandy and Sheila and Melissa, would you like to introduce yourselves briefly? Maybe say a little bit about your work briefly. Mandy.
Hi, my name's Mandy Mizuta. I am a EDD doctoral student, and my research is focused on institutional silos within higher education organizations. And I'm looking at how we can use collaborative governance, a policy from public administration, to help build models to enhance equitable decision-making within siloed organizations. And I am using the ePortfolio within my dissertation to help enhance my dissertation process.
Great. Melissa.
Is it sad that I'm like, what did I do? No, I'm kidding. Yeah. Hi, I'm Melissa. I'm a recently completed doctoral student in the College of Education. My focus was on post-secondary education and really specifically on ePortfolio development. But what I ended up doing is taking a look at case studies of innovation on an urban university campus. So we're going to take a little bit of a look through those case studies today.
Great. And last but not least, Sheila.
My name is Sheila Mullooly, and I'm also a doctoral candidate. My work is really interdisciplinary, and it bridges the intersections of critical future studies, really considering alternatives for our future in higher education, and specifically through the methodology of arts-based research. To my background, just to note that I have 26 years in international higher education. So the multi-paper dissertation has really been a liberating journey that I'll tell you more about later.
Great. So we're curious about your interest in this session, and we want to make sure we cover things you want to hear about. So if the other participants could share a little bit about what you're interested in, that would be great. I can call on people. Gail, you look ready.
I am ready. This is such a far cry from when I went through doing my dissertation. And even when I was going up for tenure, when they said, don't collaborate, don't work with people, this is just all you, and you have to sit in your room and do this. And I love the idea of this multi-paper, richly reflective portfolio that, we're giving credence to something that we know works. and we're accepting it as scholarship, and that doesn't happen. Change doesn't happen very readily in higher education. So I really want to hear your stories because they're important. So thank you.
Great. How about you, Sonia?
Oh, good, but just like cut me off after a certain time. It keeps running.
Okay.
I'm huge fans, as you know, of you and Melissa. So I'm interested in you and everything you do. And so I'm excited to see, and I know about some of the challenges Melissa went through trying to get permission to do ePortfolio. So I'm super excited that there's 2 more people that can offer examples. And I'm glad that you are being tenacious and persistent and not giving up in portfolio as a space to do research and reflection. I think the reflection adds so much to the process, and it's kind of like this asynchronous mentoring for people who are new to the process and want to understand what it looks like.
Thank you, Sonia. And Sonia is also from Portland State University, but she a different discipline. Okay, Hannah. Sorry, just when you're going to take a drink, right? And say a little bit about, say where you're from, Hannah, too.
Yes, my name is Hannah Pugh. I am a recent graduate from Wheaton College, which is a small liberal arts college just outside of Chicago. I'm hoping to attend graduate school. I'm looking into getting my master's before my PhD, but I'm very interested in getting my PhD in philosophy. I did spend some time as an undergraduate as an interdisciplinary studies major, and I actually researched ePortfolios. So it's a topic that I have a lot of passion for and interest in. And I just haven't really read much about doctoral dissertation or ePortfolios. So I'm excited to hear and see examples on those and just learn from you guys. So yeah.
Great. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
And Allie, how about you?
So I'm here. So I'm Allie. Hi, I'm from Carleton University. I'm keen on this session because I think it is the area that I know the least about. I have a lot of experience supporting instructors in use of ePortfolio at the undergrad and master's level. Only one instructor I've ever worked with who was even thinking about it at the PhD level, but that was more as kind of a back channel, not a full dissertation focus. So I'm really excited to hear about this because it's all new to me. Thank you.
Great. Maybe we'll keep you awake. How about you, Andrew?
Hi, I'm Andrew Longhofer. I am the Director of Student Experience and Professional Development at the School of Pharmacy at Pacific University here in Oregon. I'm interested in this session partially because I know Melissa and I know Candace, and I also know Sonia and Gail. But I am currently particularly interested in how to think about and approach postgraduate work in an ePortfolio, like through ePortfolio methods, and how a lot of the literature on ePortfolio as a teaching tool and as a learning assessment tool focuses on undergrads, and kind of I'm looking for as much evidence either out of practice or out of research on ePortfolio in the postgraduate setting, partially as social proof for some of the faculty that I'm working with, that it is legitimate for serious work after the undergrad level. And I'm also really interested in the ways in which I know that some of these projects have incorporated some of the subjectivity of the researcher, and how to incorporate that in appropriate ways that supports the conclusions that are being reached in the work, and how that's different from some of the typical things that we talk about in terms of objectivity versus subjectivity in the PhD academic writing courses that I teach.
Great. Thank you so much. And Maria, welcome, and we're introducing ourselves where you're from and what your interest is in this session.
Hello, everybody. My name is Maria, and I apologize for not having my camera on because I am actually in Gainesville, Florida, and so it's past the working hours. I do not have my camera at home and my computer. So I work with the Office of Global Learning, and I advise usually undergraduate students on their ePortfolio capstone project. But this summer, this is like what our office will be doing for the first time. We have postdoctoral visiting scholars from Jordan, and we're going to like work on the ePortfolio project with them. But that is not exactly area of my expertise, and I don't feel very confident advising somebody who has like a higher level of education than me, because like the highest I have is master's. So basically, I just want to learn everything that I can about doctoral and postdoctoral ePortfolios, so I can advise those scholars better.
Great. Thank you so much. Wonderful. Okay. Oops. Okay. So let me tell you a little bit of background. I think we'll cover a lot of what you are interested in. We are a Carnegie Project for the Educational Doctorate EDD program. And to be in that conglomerate, they ask programs to focus on addressing problems of or in practice. And there's a desire for all the research that comes out of these CPED programs to have research that is actionable. In other words, research that actually allows people to do something about a problem pretty immediately. The organization also has a commitment to exploring alternative dissertations beyond the 5-chapter monograph, knowing that in doing so, it probably is more accessible to practitioners for use in the future. So enter the ePortfolio. And I'm going to let Melissa talk a little bit about this, but I do want to say that we propose the ePortfolio as an alternative dissertation to our graduate school here at Portland State University, but we were rejected. But I'm going to let Melissa talk about her proposal a little bit.
Thanks, Candace. I'll just go ahead and let you pull that portfolio up on your side since I don't have a link open. And Andrew, I was actually just thinking of you when you were thinking about the research. And in fact, any of you who are interested in some more recent research on how portfolios are being used at the doctoral level, Candace and I spent a couple afternoons scratching through the dirt, looking for the research on this particular thing. So if you want to scroll down a little bit there, Candace, I wanted to frame this application. If you'll go back up a little bit, there's a question there towards the top, Candace. And it's the question that I have in my own personal portfolio. And as I was struggling with the 5-chapter monograph, I thought, why am I struggling with this? And I always have this question in mind, which is what needs to be retained and what needs to be transformed. And when I was thinking about the process for creating this dissertation that wasn't working for me, I thought, well, let me go to my advisor and see what we can retain of the required components and what we can transform so that I can function, for crying out loud, right? So you can go ahead and scroll down if you want to now. We put the purpose for writing to them, the background of my own work thus far, so they would know that I had been making gainful progress and what I did have available, and kind of some of my accolades, and also what I thought was the right players, the right social actors on the scene at PSU, which would be myself and Candace, because we've been doing portfolio development for over 20 years, right? And Candace much longer than I have, that we thought we had the wherewithal and the knowledge to be able to successfully complete this. And I talked a little bit about how the problem-based learning approach and digital identity and digital citizenship and using platform functions and the sense-making process. So I really tried to lay it all out on the line here. And then I made a note in this request for them too, that Candace and I were leaders, right? And that we did align with the project standards and outcomes for the Graduate School of Education. We listed all of those in there. We talked about our overarching motivations and implications. And here, Andrew, is where I think you'll really see, and in fact, any of you that will have available these slides to you, some quotes from several pieces of recent literature on doctoral portfolios and some of the reasoning behind moving in that direction. And I'll be talking a little bit more about some of those motivations when we take a look at my doctoral portfolio later. And then the prototype doctoral portfolio, at the time, we created a very rigid structure and we submitted that rigid structure. And of course, they declined us. And so I said, well, if you aren't willing to accept it in this format, then we'll dig around and we'll look for another alternative format. We weren't ready to give up. We were going to persist in this idea that we'd be able to proceed with the research that I had available to me and the ideas I had for future research. And so we took this rejection and we kept on moving.
That's right. And we dug into all the resources and we discovered that our graduate school did allow a multi-paper format. And as Melissa and I talked about the work that she wanted to be able to do, we realized that this was actually a perfect format. And in reality, an ePortfolio was a great way to be able to share those documents, those multi-papers, with an authentic audience. And some of them had already been shared with an authentic audience. So the candidates that you're seeing here for their doctoral program had different reasons for choosing this format, and they had different reasons for choosing the ePortfolio to represent their work. And so now we're going to move to each of these folks that have done this work, and they'll tell you about that process. So Melissa is first. You're on mute, Melissa.
Yes, I was only just saying all right to myself. So as she mentioned, I moved to a multi-paper format. That multi-paper format allows for collaborative writing, and it also doesn't require that the 3 papers be connected in terms of the research they accomplish. However, you do want to be able to connect them with a threaded, like a red thread theme. So I shifted from this monograph to the multi-paper dissertation, which included collaborative writing in every one of my articles. And that co-authorship representation is something I was able to include in my portfolio. I'm a community-driven animal and I work better in a group, and I'm concerned with the cohort and the good of all and always being collaborative. And so for me to be able to represent the type of research I was doing with others increased my level of comfort around several things that I'll make note of in the portfolio. I really couldn't imagine moving away from the way I have been thinking and compiling information in a digital world where you can navigate by using links instead of scrolling or page flipping and those sorts of things. It was as if I was being forced to go backwards in time in order to represent my work. So the portfolio allowed me to continue with my current habits of collecting, reflecting, and making connections across the type of scholarly work that I was doing. One of the other benefits, I think, one of the causes of the monograph fading away in some of the articles that I read is that one of the things we need to practice doing more is translating our scholarly work in multiple social languages. And for me, it's not just social languages, it's contextual ones, and it also includes digital literacy components. So the meta benefits of this were that I could use a digital experience to talk about digital experiences with that multimedia and the video and the images and all the link content. If I hadn't been able to do that, I really don't think I would have successfully completed my dissertation. I was at the point where I just needed to walk away because I couldn't represent it in the way I was thinking, which is in the digital sphere. So there was an intended level of extended rigor, and we pushed pretty hard on this when we went to the graduate school. And I do want to make note that the College of Education supported our request for a portfolio as the culminating requirement, but weren't able to kind of during COVID times take on that particular flag with grad school. They are considering it at this time. But that intended level of extended rigor, which was reflection, was something that we talked about at every meeting we had. Who I am in relationship to my academic publications is actually, I believe, an essential part of the context of a researcher's research. You know, when we work with undergraduate researchers, we talk to them about not only reading academic work, but understanding who the person is that is writing the academic work. So I feel like it gave me an opportunity to wrap my own experiences and reflections around my academic work to provide additional context that is not existing in other portfolio or other dissertation types. So if you don't mind if I share my screen, then Candace, I'll show the portfolio for a few minutes. How's that sound?
Go right ahead. I will stop the share.
So right before I get started and taking a look at the portfolio, what I'm displaying here is Bloom's taxonomy of digital planning verbs. If you haven't yet seen this, and many of you have, I encourage you to take a look at it. I'm a Bloom's taxonomy junkie when I think about verbs, right? So when I'm reviewing portfolios, one of the first things I look at are the nouns and the verbs. The verbs in a portfolio to me represent the actions that a student is claiming they have competencies for or that they have already accomplished. And I find that the verbs in those portfolios are often sell the student very short, right? So reviewing what they said they've done and having them evaluate those verbs is important. When I sat down to think about the type of work that I do on a daily basis, I'm using these verbs, I'm executing these digital activities, I'm performing these functions. And I think that I could say the majority of these are actually an outcome of me creating the dissertation in the portfolio format, the ePortfolio format. So we could have actually probably tagged on many of these digital verbs to the type of work that I was doing. But as I am working my way through the portfolio, I keep in mind, I can see all of these actions that I took. So I hope that you also keep in mind all these additional layers of digital competency that were required to perform and complete the product of the portfolio. Okay, so here I have a link to the portfolio itself. I'm just going to make it a little bigger. I don't know if that's helpful. I have here my welcome page for the portfolio. I tried to keep the structure of it very simple. In here, I include the guidelines for the for the multi-paper doctoral dissertation guidelines so that everyone can check and make sure I have met those guidelines. I offer an orientation to the portfolio, which tells the reader how I would like them to experience the portfolio in terms of digital navigation, including reflections, human subjects, and my personal portfolio. But what was really important to me, as I mentioned earlier, as a community animal, is that I had the opportunity to represent my committee, to thank them specifically for the things that they had accomplished. In the abstract and introduction, I use images quite a bit. I wrote this in an actual writing workshop. I have acknowledgements here, but I use images to represent papers. So if you want to see the full text of something, instead of embedding that whole paper, I have an image here that will take you out to that particular document if you'd like to review it. It's nice to be able to also include what I consider to be key pieces of information or theoretical frameworks that are used there. Paper 1, paper 2, and paper 3 each have 2 tabs. Paper 1 includes the actual first paper that I wrote, which is academic integrity and fully online degree completion programs. Here again, I use an image, but I also have additional images so people can find out more about the project, which is lovely. For each of these papers, I include a reflection, and I'm going to focus on those a little bit more than I am going to on the content of my dissertation. To be able to have a link to my published article with my co-authors and what they helped me do in the process, and to think again, go back to the paper and pull quotes out of the paper and then include my own reflections on what we were hoping for, what we wanted to do, what we wanted to accomplish. So I have a quote and a reflection process on here. And then I also included some of the outcomes. So what happened with the work that we accomplished there? Well, we became one of the top online business education programs in the nation, right? So it's nice to be able to show what occurred after the paper as well in the reflection. Paper 2, which was on ePortfolio culture with Candace. Also a reflection here talking about what we learned in the process. Nice to be able to represent our friendship as well. Reflections on the paper around intrusive inclusion of stakeholders and building an ePortfolio culture on campus. Thanking the additional individuals who would probably have gone unnoticed in a 5-chapter dissertation, and just including them in this community that is my ePortfolio, dissertation ePortfolio. And then my third article was actually a book chapter that was co-authored by my colleagues here, Gail and Oscar and Andrew, and it was lovely to experience. And looking into the reflection, you can see me offering homage to them and talking about what I learned through the process. Reflections on paper 3, this is potentially my favorite one. Thinking about what I learned as an author in this and some of the benefits to collaborative writing was really important. It helped frame and preface the conclusion, my reflection and conclusion. So this multi-paper dissertation has an introduction, a conclusion, that bookend. And so it was nice to be able to really think about the lessons learned across those papers. The conclusion, I don't think would have been possible without these layers of integration that I went through, reflecting on what each of the articles meant and the outcomes of those. But I also really like the overarching reflection. So I reflected on each paper, but I also reflected on the dissertation process and the product. So here's my products. Here's my thoughts on the process, the collaborative writing format and its benefits, including things like diversity of opinion, division of labor, multiple proofreaders, increases the efficacy with which we communicate our ideas in research, which seemed important to me. And then something you will never see ever again, probably the dissertation, which is one of the clips from the Breakfast Club. After they had spent an entire day together thinking about who they were and who they were individually and collectively and how that informed one another, right? Because that's really what happened to me through the collaborative writing process. We understood who we were as writers in a more impactful way. It was nice to be able to represent that with some pop culture and social media. And then included why I chose the structure of the portfolio that I did and the 4 things that I have been teaching others that hinged on the structure of the portfolio I have now. So that I had a room of my own, that this folio thinking habits that I had for 20 years would not leave me behind when I tried to complete my dissertation, that the integrative learning was perhaps the most important outcome for me, and that the reflection was like the oxygen for me in this dissertation. So I will stop sharing, and thanks for taking a look at the portfolio. And I'm not sure if we want to do questions at the end for all of us, dear, or how you want to go about it.
If we could wait until the end, hold your questions or drop them in the chat. Let me go back to sharing screen. Get to, I think, Mandy, who's going to talk with us a little bit first.
It is. Hello again, everyone. Once again, my name is Mandy Mizuta, and I, was very new to the ePortfolio process. A little bit of background I did not give in my introduction is I am a very interdisciplinary person with a very interdisciplinary academic and professional background. My undergraduate work was in both English and philosophy. My master's work was an interdisciplinary master's in sociology and political science. And then I had started on my PhD in that same subject and my program shut down. And so I took some time off, reevaluated, saw where my career was going, and I kind of really transformed kind of what my life trajectory was at. I am someone who kind of worked my way through college, and in the meantime kind of fell into working in higher ed. And so I amassed a lot of different work experiences along the way, kind of going to school, taking some time off, building up money, building up life experience and work experience, and then going back to school. And so I've really just ended up with just kind of a pendulum of work and life and academic experiences. And so I came towards my doctoral education with all of this. And it's really kind of come to a head with my doctoral degree in higher ed. And then I mentioned at the start that my dissertation is also interdisciplinary nature as well. So I am in a educational leadership doctoral program with an emphasis in post-secondary education. However, I am taking a concept in collaborative governance that is from a field of public administration and kind of seeing what we can take from that field and applying it over into higher ed. So why am I sharing this information with you? I find that the multi-paper dissertation format and the ePortfolio was such a natural home for my non-traditional background. And, with the way that the traditional, 5-chapter dissertation that process was affording me, um, it was becoming a lot of roadblocks to being able to accomplish what I needed to do with a traditional literature review, with a traditional 5-chapter dissertation, to really tell the story of who I was, how my personal experiences had shaped me, how my professional experiences had shaped me within just a 5-chapter dissertation. And I wasn't doing myself justice, I didn't think. And another thing I think would be really valuable to stop and mention at this point is that along with pursuing my degree, as a lot of people, is I work full time. And in the midst of pursuing my degree, I actually had a career shift to where my current job is actually more in the public administration sphere. I still do a little bit of work in higher ed, and our paths cross, and again, an interdisciplinary nature. But I'm finding that, again, I have this same theme where I'm existing with one foot in one world and one foot in another world. And so the ePortfolio was a way for me to really tell my story holistically, to really serve as this bridge between my academic and my professional work. And to really engage authentically without sacrificing academic rigor. And as I am, I've successfully defended my proposal, I am to the point where I am really looking to leverage my degree professionally. And I kind of, if I was to market myself professionally, is I see myself as someone who is a bridge between, the theoretical side, the academia side of things, and the practical side. And that's where I find my home. That's where I found my niche. And so what better way to, tell my story than the ePortfolio. And so that's where I've really found the ePortfolio to be of value for me, is to be that tool to tell my story in a very holistic way. Another kind of distinctive about the ePortfolio that I really wanted to highlight for you all today was that in utilizing the ePortfolio within my doctoral journey is that I've found it to be a tool for equitable and accessible scholarship. And in a couple of ways that this has really proven to be the case. And the first is that I've found that it's enhanced audience engagement within my work. That has kind of taken part in a couple of different ways. First of all, I have found that I've been able to give this to potential clients for consulting work I've done, for potential colleagues who are trying to better understand what my dissertation is about, for colleagues on the academic side of things who are trying to better understand some of the interdisciplinary nature of, where, since I'm kind of drifting a little bit outside and kind of crossing those interdisciplinary boundaries outside of higher education, I'm finding that by sending them the link to my portfolio, they're able to kind of engage with my work. So that's really helped with that audience engagement. Another way is that I've found that I'm a first generation college student, and my family and have not been really able to engage with a lot of the work that I've done. They've been really proud of me, but they've not really been able to engage with a lot of the work that I've done scholastically. But with my ePortfolio, that's something that they can see and tangibly touch. So they've really been excited to be able to engage in my work in that way. I want to give you a brief overview of my portfolio, if you're okay with that, Candace. I'll make it very speedy.
That'd be great.
It looks like, can you allow for screen sharing? It looks like it's disabled at the moment.
Okay. There you go. I think maybe I can only have one co-host. Thought I made you all co-hosts, but now you should be able to do it.
Fantastic. So you'll see my portfolio here on your screen. And one of the things I also wanted to point out kind of as this holistic storytelling is that by utilizing my portfolio in the way that I did, I was able to kind of bring in art. That was a part of me that I'm a very logical person. I do a lot of project management in my day-to-day job. And I was able to bring in the artistic side of me that I wouldn't have been able to bring out in my doctoral work otherwise. So here in my homepage, you'll see my doctoral work. I'm able to bring in a welcome. And then here I'm able to offer a statement of positionality. I kept the aesthetic of my page kind of clean and simple. And it kind of really goes into, you know, my idea of wanting to keep my work very accessible and very practical. And with my statement of kind of positionality here, along with each of my articles that I have landing pages, I've explicitly chosen images that symbolize actual parts of my article. So my article and my topic are about silos. So each of my articles talk about silos in different ways, shapes, and forms. And so if you read the abstracts, if you read the articles, you can then kind of understand a little bit more about why I chose the images I did. So it added this extra dimension to my paper. And I really appreciated that because I'm someone who really appreciates imagery and depth in that artistic nature. So with my Pebble Pad, I have my positionality right here. I have my initial abstract and proposal here. You can click on the links to open the full documents for each of my proposals and articles. At this stage in the process, where I'm at is I have a full introduction and I have a full article 1. And I've highlighted quotes from each of the articles. And then for articles 2 and 3, since I am just at the ABD stage, articles 2 and articles 3 are at just the outline form. So I have made thorough outlines for articles 2 and articles 3. And then I've highlighted what I plan on doing for my concluding thoughts. One of the things that will be unique to mine is that I am doing a toolkit to make mine extra practical. I really want to hone in on how to make my dissertation practical on the ground up. And then I've highlighted journals that I will be submitting to. So I think that that's about my time. So I'm going to turn that back over to you, Candace. Thank you for the opportunity to share.
Great. Thank you, Mandy. And now we will hear from, it's not what I wanted. Let's stop share. Let's get the share right.
Do you want me to just go ahead and share?
I got it,
Okay.
but it's not. Why is it not doing? Yeah, go ahead and share. Except I
Okay.
don't think you're a co-host now, but you will be.
Oh, I think I still
You
have. Let's see.
Okay, great.
Oh, no, sorry, you disabled me. Could you re-enable me? Let's see. Let me try again.
That's weird. Now I have to make you the host. That's okay.
We can pass the baton.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. All right, let me get us where we need to go. Is that working?
Don't see the screen shared yet.
Oh, okay, let me see. One more click. Here we go. Have I done it? Let's see. There we go. How about that? All right, let's see, and I'm unmuted. Okay, great. So thank you so much for this perfect setup. I'm going to set my timer too. I'm a bit of a talker. I need my time aids. Okay, thanks for that great setup, Candace and Mandy and Melissa. It was really great to see that preview of the reflection piece that was added for your final dissertation presentation, Melissa. Thank you for that preview and for the wonderful setup. Mandy, I think you're going to hear some variations on a theme here. So why the ePortfolio? It's a digital tool. It's holistic evidence of the author's accomplishment and complex intersectional identities. It's a tool for critical reflection and really this component of visual and visible scholarship that can become more public. For me, these were all considerations, and I have to add, because the trail was already broken for Mandy and me in a way. I was immediately convinced that the multi-paper dissertation should have an ePortfolio, and it just adds a level of complexity and richness and a mode of communication that would otherwise not be possible. A little bit to my journey, I probably started 3 different 5-chapter dissertations 3 times over. I'm the kind of person that is also very interdisciplinary. I have a background as a visual artist. I have a background as an applied linguist, teaching English to speakers of other languages for many, many years. And this sort of was a paradigm shift that got me unstuck in a way that, as Candace graciously says, like, you just couldn't make up your mind, in a way that this format allowed me to bring the richness of my background and my vision to the task. So it was very much about the integration of scholarship. My dissertation, you'll find at the intersection of critical future studies, really considering in our uncertain world, what is the future of higher education, and with a focus on arts-based research. Why? Because it's a form of public scholarship. If we're really honest and we look at, how many times journal articles are accessed, many of those accesses are our mentors, our mentees, our beloved, our networks of colleagues, which are fabulous. But in terms of being truly public or accessible, it's not really the case. And then it's been a very painful period in international higher education. As you can imagine, the COVID-19 impact has just been nothing short of brutal. And I really found myself focusing in on the problem in practice about potential transformation within international higher education specifically. So really, I frame my ePortfolio and my dissertation as this gesturing towards transformation in higher education, specifically international higher education. There are many that would argue that given the complexities of our world at this state of climate crisis, and seeking planetary justice, that higher education, in fact, needs to be international or have a global lens. So this was a tool that I was able to use to integrate all of my passions and my research work. So the question was really, how can we promote, provoke, and evoke a deeper, more complex understanding of the human experience, specifically around international higher education? In other words, if we don't gesture or seek towards transformation, we've sort of inadvertently opted for collapse scenarios. And those of us who are working in international education have been living through these collapse scenarios. There are many who have experienced joblessness and many other challenges. So I very much frame my work as futures facing is the mode to whereby we can actually evolve. And if we're going to evolve, particularly in the interests of vulnerable students who are not effectively centered institutionally at the moment, we really need to center the lived educational experiences that are not widely seen or heard or witnessed. And this led me on this path. And so what I'm proposing is that through collaborative, participatory, futures-facing, arts-based group processes, we can highlight interdependency and we can generate understanding of systemic patterns. And this is a really critical function of futures thinking, which considers alternative futures in higher education, those ranging from the preposterous to the possible, plausible, projected, and on to the preferred. As you're probably getting a sense, my work takes a critical lens, and this really involves asking the question of to whom, where, by whom, under what conditions. So in other words, I'm interested to see how we can empower our students to express their voice and agency in order to become futurists in their own sense. In other words, to prevent others from futuring all over them. In other words, a means of being the signal for the preferred futures that we hope to face. Let me return now to the ePortfolio and give you a brief tour of that. How am I doing? Okay, let's take a quick look. Again, I'm at the ABD state, so my portfolio really, we have Melissa to credit for graciously sharing her experience and also her formatting. Again, you'll find the landing page that is really a means of orienting the reader to the three pieces. The first piece is a published article. It's a case study in developing foresightfulness and community at Portland State University. And it was also co-authored. It really added a lot of depth to the experience to really engage in this sort of, in a way, it was sort of auto-ethnographical because this was a collection or a collaborative of Futures Fellows from PSU who co-authored the piece. Because we are in the state of environmental collapse that we are, you might notice that there's a lot of nature photography throughout my my portfolio, and I try to highlight and situate the work within our environmental conditions. So there's an introductory piece, and this abstract allows me to weave a web that connects the futures work to the arts-based work, and then to the transformative approaches to international higher education. So you'll see photos. These are my original photos. And then the second article is an arts-based research article. And it is a hybrid format. It is both a review of another arts-based research project and a poetic inquiry into the project. What I was able to do was to take participant voiced speech included in the transcripts in the study and to use poetry as a mode of inquiry to explore the effectiveness of this particular case study. So again, here I've linked, there's following suit with Melissa, there are the photos that then take you to the actual piece that can be downloaded or read online. I've included some background on the framework and key points. And I'm very happy to share that this piece is going to be published. It's confirmed. And as I'm ABD, the final piece, which is entitled Transforming International Higher Education in a Post-COVID World, Using Methodologies of Future Thinking and Arts-Based Research to Amplify International Student Voices, will be forthcoming. Right now, at this stage, again, there's the outline and an abstract. Like the other speakers have mentioned, it's also been really great tool for using professionally. I've included a professional portfolio, and then I even go on to include a few additionals. There's a philosophy of my teaching statement included and some other examples of poetic inquiry that I've done. So I think I'll stop the tour at that.
Want to run the rest of the slides, Sheila? That would be great.
Oh, okay. So at this moment, this is just the placeholder. All right, let me go back to our slides. Okay, so, okay.
Great. Let me just share some broader lessons learned. I think for me in advising this students, I learned that it really did promote some integrative learning that I don't think would have happened without the ePortfolio. It did integrate the human dimension. They were able to express themselves in multiple ways, as Mandy was saying, you know, to include an artistic bent that wouldn't have been in her presentation, if not. Would you go back, Sheila? You clicked. Thanks. And then, yeah, so it included that whole student. You really got a sense of who these students are. And in doing, even though in the requirements for Portland State for multi-paper dissertations, they don't require that they be linked, there were obvious links. There were ways that the things that they were interested in linked together. And if you were going to become a professor, you would have to create a scholarly agenda. And really what they've done early on is create their own scholarly agenda with their work. I think as Mandy kind of profoundly talked about, it made the scholarship more accessible to groups of people that might not usually read this kind of work. And it promoted equity and inclusion as part of that by really telling individual stories. I think the thing that was most amazing to me as a doctoral advisor is that oftentimes in proposal and dissertation defenses, the faculty that are on the committee are trying to outsmart each other and say all the smart things and ask all the smart questions and point out all the errors that students are making. And what ended up happening in these defenses is that the ePortfolio really invited more discussion about the topics that these students were sharing. And really, it was a collegial discussion. It was not a defense of any kind. And I think people were very willing to be helpful and make suggestions, but also just to have really engaging intellectual discussions about the topics and questions about the topics. It was really a wonderful kind of place to be in the academic world. So with that, go ahead, Sheila, I'd love to hear if you've got questions and comments. We've got about 5 more minutes. That's all we got.
Sonia?
So I noticed that collegiality, which, you know, I felt the lack of in my own dissertation process, even though I got, you know, excellent feedback, and my committee is super smart and helped, you know, like pushed my writing and made it awesome. It definitely felt like a defense, and I do like that aspect, and I think it would be nice to grow, because I think if we're imagining transformation of education and making it more accessible, like that's the kind of thing that will help people from different backgrounds come into the academy and feel like they belong there. It occurs to me that you are going to have a very rich data set of reflection on dissertation, and that like in a few years you collect a number of students doing this work, just doing a textual analysis of the reflections that people have on their dissertation process, and could be it's so practical for, again, inclusivity and equity, and, you know, expanding the academy to have different voices. because I think a lot of people give up because they think other people don't feel this way when they've done this project. And it's so helpful to know what the struggles are for everyone and how they kind of met that and how they surpassed that or overcame it. Is such a service to offer people. So I look forward to reading that article.
Sonia, I wanted to say, actually, I feel like I had the best partner in thinking about the reflection, because the reflections we tried to categorize by reflection on the product, the papers themselves. But then if you notice, we looked at the process, the product, the collaborative writing component, which not everyone will have, but the benefit to me is the author, implications for review. So I think that if we, it's nice that the ladies are using the prototype in some ways, because it would offer some data. But again, reflection's a wild pony, right? It can be on anything, but it is nice to think, could we get reflection on the process and the product, as well as, some additional reflection. So thanks for that.
Sheila, would you go ahead and stop sharing? Yeah, if we can talk just. Andrew.
Yeah, the meeting that I just came out of before coming into this, we were talking about the sort of challenge of building critical consciousness among doctoral students in recognizing and acknowledging that academic writing itself is an artificial language developed in the 18th century by a bunch of rich white dudes who wanted to make themselves feel special and exclude anybody else from their special smart people clubs. And how the dissertation process for a lot of the students that I'm working with, who are from lots of different backgrounds, both personally and professionally, who have tremendous life experiences to bring in and contribute into their research, truly are being colonized by the process of asking them to write the traditional dissertation, and how to work with them to help them make the decisions about when they want to push back against the structures and the ways of knowing we're enforcing upon them in the dissertation writing process, and when to just assimilate to it, when to just comply, and what the goals are, and what the priorities are, and what the factors are, and how their values play into it when they're making that decision on an improvisational basis as they're encountering it. And to me, the process, particularly by which you pushed back against the graduate school and requested the original portfolio itself as the product, and then finding a middle way of using a foothold in the institution's policies to be able to subvert those policies in delivering a portfolio that contains what they were asking for, is a really interesting and exciting model for being able to kind of undermine that colonizing process that's being executed on doctoral students. And I'm wondering if you all could talk a little bit about sort of what you think it might have felt like to have to fit within the traditional dissertation, and how that might be different for you.
Yeah.
And whether you, as a person and as a researcher, feel like you could have preserved and built yourself through that model in the way that you did with this model instead.
Well, I'm going to start, sorry. I'm just going to start by saying there's no way I would have completed. I was at the point where I was leaving my doctoral program. And the question that I asked my advisor, and the question that I keep asking myself during that period of time was, have I not already proven that I'm an expert in this field? I've been doing this for 20 years. I finished my core paper and my coursework with a 4.0, and I cannot bring myself to do this. And I don't understand why I can't be considered an expert, and I don't have the wherewithal to keep going. I was going to give up on myself because what I was thinking and what I was doing, what I had already accomplished didn't fit the mold, only to find out that what I had been doing actually did fit the mold, and I already had the publications, and I was actually already an expert. And I think that that's a part of how you go about it, right? Which is Ask yourself the question, am I an expert? And then say, regardless of what they're telling me to do, how can I still demonstrate that expertise? I thought that even if this didn't go off successfully, I would at least have the product of the portfolio to prove my expertise in this area, because I didn't know what else to do. So I would have absolutely 100% left the program had this not been available to me. And so this was desperation that led me to the door and then back to the door again, because it was either this or nothing. So that's my story.
You know, Andrew, I could say that I would have finished, but I think that I would have compromised myself. And I don't think that the work that I was doing, because of the interdisciplinary nature of my studies, would have been given a chance to flourish and be as transformative as it is proving to be already. Without this opportunity. And I will also say that the opportunity to flex my artistic muscles has been so invigorating and so motivating to get my rear in gear. The practice of putting together the portfolio actually helped organize. It was an exercise in organization, and it was an exercise in, I found myself, whenever I would get stuck in writing, going to my portfolio and getting things done in my portfolio, because I could exercise my artistic brain and put things together artistically and be inspired to write. And so it really became a cyclical process where I was getting inspiration, and I was finding that it was invigorating me with a more of a passion for the work that I was doing, because I was fully bringing myself to the process.
I don't know if I'm going to answer the question on whether I would have finished or not, but I kind of concur that I don't know, there was something really, it was like a linchpin for me. It was very empowering to really have this holistic tool, think about again, also someone with a long career in higher ed, so much expertise, also a real passion and vision, and feeling like I couldn't bring all of me to the 5-chapter dissertation. Also really someone who went on this fantastical, it's not fantastical, it's also very realistic journey to become a futurist. I can't thank Dr. Laura Neeson and the PSU Future Collaboratory, and also Candace for suggesting that I sign up for this journey in the first place. What happened was really, I found myself in these tandem learning processes and so jazzed about all of them. It felt reductionist and it felt limiting, and it actually felt like it would turn off my passion for lifelong learning if I had squeezed myself through that process. And I also, similar to what you just mentioned, Andrew, I found myself struggling with just really kind of doggedly wanting to express my voice as it came out, which I'm a little bit dyslexic and I'm multilingual, and some of my academic writing isn't necessarily quote unquote traditional academic writing. I can write academically quite well if I want to, but I found myself resistant. I didn't want to actually get into that voice and that level of writing until I'd found my direction. So it was really like turning a switch. Once this became an option, all the pieces sort of fell into place for me, and I could bring that level of complexity, and I could keep insisting on my 3 legs and three fields of knowledge and human knowledge, that of the international higher education, art space. I do have a background, I'm a fine artist as well, and that of the futures. And I really started feeling like if we are not exploring how education can transform people to be more authentically empowered and willing to look at and meet and see the uncertainty of the future, then I'm not quite sure what we're doing. So this is definitely the format enabled the success of the journey, I would say.
I want to add one last thing. I know we're over time, which is I couldn't be collaborative in the 5-chapter format. I couldn't be a part of the community that I was already a part of. To be able to get feedback from peer reviewers, your collaborative writers, and your dissertation committee, and your advisor, and I felt surrounded. I never felt that way in my 5-chapter. So there's that.
Thank you very much for joining us in this last session of the day, and I hope to see all of you tomorrow. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.